serious? People who have lost a shoe on the side of a highway. How did it happen? Friend grabbed it off my foot and dangled it from the window. She accidentally dropped it. When we went back to look for it, we couldn't find it. If you drop my shoe out the window, I will drop both of yours out the window while you are still wearing them. When I was a kid, we were making the long journey to Disney World and my sister and I were fighting like cats and dogs. Eventually my mom, who was driving, had heard enough. Stepdad didn't seem to mind since he was mixing screwdrivers in his mouth by taking a half gulp of orange juice and a half gulp of vodka, swishing it around and then swallowing, and pulled the car over on the side of road. She proceeds to spank both of us and toss us back in the car and yells at us not to say another word for the next several hours until we get to Disney. Once we arrive and I was finally allowed to speak again, I informed her that my shoe had fallen off on the side of the road during the spanking. I actually lost someone else's shoe on the highway. I was hitchhiking and a trucker picked me up. He kept his shoes on the steps. When you close the door, the steps are covered, so they're safe. I noticed the shoes when I entered, but when I got out at the next stop I noticed there was only one shoe. So it must have fallen out when I got in. I'm sorry, Mr. Truck Driver. Used to drive truck. Kept my work boots in the jockey box. My switch driver did the same thing. We'd just wear sneakers when driving. Switch driver called me on day telling me the jockey box came open and one of my boots fell out. Like F, these boots are only 2 weeks old and spent $350 on them. Whatever it is, what it is happens. But switch driver says he'll keep a lookout for it. I figured there's no point. About 6-7 weeks later he actually spotted it on the side of the highway and picked it up. It wasn't even bad. Like mostly just dirty. I figured for sure when he grabbed it it'd be like an old dog's chew toy or something. Mainly just dusty. Cleaned it up and ended up using those boots still to this day. My drunk mate chucked a Yeezy out the window. Never saw that damn shoe again. Yeeted a Yeezy. Watch this become a YouTube challenge. A friend of mine stepped into dog poop while making a stop. When we were back in the car we all noticed. She eventually just threw it out of the window. I have a friend who pooped his pants on a road trip. Immediately took his underwear and jeans off and threw them out the window. He sat in the back seat like Winnie the Pooh for about 3 hours in silence. I threw my sister's shoe out of the car once when no one was looking. Just kinda slipped it up casually and dropped it. Vanished into the void. So far as anyone else was concerned, I was sometimes a shy little brother. My brother threw a tantrum and chucked the first thing he could find out the window. I was on the passenger side. Entered the car, left both flip-flops on the floor and closed the door. We drove 4 hours. Arrived to the friend's home. I opened the door and only in that moment I realized that I instinctively expected to see my shoes out of the door. Just like when I get into the shower door. I know. Brain being weird. I accidentally left a pair of shoes on the roof of my car before heading to a friend's house. He lives a couple exits down the freeway. I got to his house and was surprised to find one shoe stuck in my roof rack. The next morning I saw the other shoe on the side of the freeway, right by the on-ramp. I pulled over and picked it up. I wore those shoes for another 6 months. Went boating. Changed out of mucky lake shoes and into regular shoes. Put mucky shoes in boat. Hit pothole with trailer. Shoe bounced out. As a kid I once stuck my foot out the window on a long car ride. And my shoe flew off when I tried to pull it back in. My mother yelled at me that if we were in an accident my leg would get ripped off. And I never did it again. I begged my mom to pull over so we could get my shoe. But she said no. See? Half the ones I've lost on the side of a highway are because I was drunk. And the other half? Stupid old Ford van had the sliding door that wouldn't close every time. Even when you thought it was closed. Take a left-hand turn and watch it pop open and slide back, leaving you flailing for the handle to slam it shut. On a trip from TX to CA somewhere it flew open and my right shoe must have fallen out unknowingly. So we pull up to the Grand Canyon and I can't find my shoe. I hopped everywhere we went around the canyon edge. Since I couldn't keep a pair of shoes safe in the van. My parents went to the dollar store and bought me the ugliest shoes I had ever seen. And that was what I wore the rest of our vacation. Most of these shoes are from truck drivers. They have shoes they wear to drive the truck and outside shoes, which they wear to walk to the toilet, a store and so on. They change the shoes while stepping inside the truck, leaving them on the steps. Sometimes they forget about them and they get blown off the steps separately while driving along the highway. This has solved a mystery for me. Thank you. I was searching through the car for something important but couldn't find it. Somehow my flip-flop, only one of course, got left behind and unnoticed for about 4 hours too. Was a good flop and beautiful. Can't find the Reef Seaside flops anymore. Was my last pair. My favorite ever pair of flip-flops died a couple of years ago. No amount of duct tape could save them. Can't find the same ones and my life has been missing something ever since. I was driving and spilled dip spit in my shoe. The dip spit smell started smelling up the car. I tried holding shoe out the window. I lost my grip. I once threw my brother's shoes out of my car on the highway after he refused to put them back on. They smelled effing terrible. He was not amused. 10/10 would do again. A cousin threw it out the window. Thank God it didn't hit anyone. My 5-year-old finds it hilarious to toss his brother's shoes out the window. So far this summer, he's tossed 3 flip-flops and a tennis shoe. I've started removing shoes and putting them in the front seat when we get in the car. My daughter went through that phase too. Shoes, toys, books etc. went out the Jeep. But being a first-time mom, I had a bit of a learning curve. I finally learned when she threw out one of her hot pink patent leather Doc Martens on a trip to the beach house. I still have no idea how she undid the double knot and got it off her foot lol. Yes. I made dad retrace our route to find the boot. He was pissed. I was 2 years old and obsessed with taking my clothes off. My mom had just bought me a brand new pair of shoes and was driving down the highway with me strapped securely in the back seat. Well, I did my thing and worked off that shiny new shoe and proceeded to yeet that moth affair out of the slightly open window. Poor mom. Saw someone throw a shoe at a Prius once. Deserved. When I was little, me and my older brother were throwing my shoe back and forth in the back of the car. One of us missed the catch and my shoe went out the window. My dad didn't want to stop since it was a cheap pair of shoes. I still wonder about that shoe 15 years later. I was in a pretty bad motorcycle accident. I was the passenger on the back of the bike. I effed my knee and ankle up pretty bad. When the paramedics came, they took my boot off and cut my jeans to stabilize everything before we headed off the ER. My ankle ended up with a hairline fracture and really bad sprain. And my knee has a really nifty scar now. Lol. After we were discharged from the hospital, I had the friend who picked us up go back to the crash site to get my boot back. Still have the boots 25 years later. So whenever I see a rando boot or shoe I think of an accident. My sister took off a shoe and threw it out the open window when she was about 4. Parents didn't notice until we got to Disneyland and it could have been anywhere along the 1.5-2 hour drive. I suspect about 63.489% of the ones found along Highway 80 around Berkeley belong to my GF. She has a bad habit of taking off her work shoes, putting them on her car roof and forgetting them there after she puts her laptop back in the trunk. Not me. My little brother's story. Me and my 2 little brothers were all in the back seat. Our dad and their mum in the front. We were on our way to a camping site. I was on the right. Younger brother, Az, on the left and youngest brother, Al, in the middle. They've been arguing for the whole journey. That really annoying type of arguing only siblings do. They won't stop and all efforts to shut them up has been useless. Al begins to kick Az. Az rolls down his window, grabs one of Al's shoes off his foot and throws it out the window. It was definitely a power move. But they continued to argue for the rest of the way there. My husband has a bad habit of placing things on the roof of the car while he gets the doors open. On the way to a wedding he did so with his expensive dress shoes as he was wearing sneakers since it was a long drive. Those shoes were never found and it was pretty embarrassing to wear sneakers with a suit to a wedding. He didn't learn his lesson though, as an entire tackle box full of fishing gear slid off the car on another trip. I was a little kid and my shoes smelled terrible, so my parents threw them out the window when I fell asleep in the car. I was at a Henry Rollins concert years ago and some idiot tossed a shoe and hit Henry. He was pissed, so he said that he was keeping the shoe and tossing from the bus window when he is 100 miles away. So I am assuming that one of the shoes you see out there came from Henry.